Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a French court agrees that one of the top former fugitives suspected of orchestrating the 1994 Rwandan genocide against Tutsis can be extradited to a UN tribunal. Also, a South African court judges that some of the country's coronavirus rules aren't fit for purpose. Certain regulations are declared unconstitutional and invalid. And despite the low incidence of coronavirus officially logged in Burundi, some bloggers there are ramping up efforts to raise awareness of how to combat the spread of the virus. We take a closer look. But first, a French court has greenlit extraditing to a UN tribunal one of the most high-profile suspected organisers of the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. Last month, 84-year-old Felicien Kabuga was arrested in Paris, where he'd been living under a false name. He's accused of bankrolling the massacres of over 800,000 Tutsis and importing many of the machetes used for the murders. His lawyers plan on appealing. Many Rwandans had hoped Kabuga could be tried in his homeland rather than being sent to The Hague or the mechanism for international criminal tribunals in Tanzania. Earlier, I asked the lawyer for the Rwandan community in France how his clients felt about Wednesday's decision.
Yes, the survivors of the genocide are satisfied by the decision rendered today by the Court of Appeal of Paris. They are happy that Kabuga be transferred. The court decides that Kabuga will be transferred to this court to be judged. But of course, the first choice, if they had the choice, the survivor of the genocide would have liked Kabuga to be judged in Rwanda, close to the place where he perpetrated the crimes for which he's being for which he will be judged. We are happy to see Kabuga be transferred to the mechanism, the judicial mechanism to judge him. This is a decision which is satisfying.
So the Rwandese community of France that you represent, they're also pushing to see accomplices of suspected orchestrators of the genocide in Rwanda pursued. What does that actually mean? What do you mean by accomplices? Who exactly are you looking for?
As you know, Kabuga have escaped to the justice since more than 20 years. The ICTR was looking for him since 1997. So to be able to run from the justice, he got aid, he got help from many people. We can't believe that the aid he got, the help he got was only from his close member of family. So we think that there is other people helped him to escape to the justice. So the Association of Rwandese Community in France would like all these people who helped him escape to justice to be judged.
Kabuga is currently 84 years old, and UN proceedings can drag on for years. Would it be much of a disappointment, in your opinion, if he dies before he does face trial?
Yeah, that would be really a big disappointment. The fear of the Rwandese community in France and of the survivor of the genocide in general is for not having justice. So if he managed to escape to justice by the time he used to be young, by the time he could face justice easily. So now, if he can escape justice by death, that would be really a big disappointment by death.
And overall, do you think that there is still enough being done today to address the injustices and atrocities of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda?
So it depends upon which country you're talking about. In Rwanda, many things have been done. You have Gacaca court, which judged all people who are suspected of being implicated in perpetrating genocide. So in Rwanda, it's finished because almost all the people who have been found, who are suspected of perpetrating genocide, have been judged. But in other countries, there is many things which still have to be done. I give you the example of France, where you have more than 20 cases which are pending now in justice. So many things are still have to be done so that the justice, so that the victims have the justice they're expecting.
Well, South African courts ruled that some of the country's lockdown restrictions are unconstitutional. The High Court has found that certain regulations are invalid because they don't do much in slowing down the rate of coronavirus infections. South Africa rolled out one of the world's strictest shutdowns on March 27th. MC Ferreira tells us more.
It's safe to say that South Africans are today trying to absorb the impact of this court ruling. It came somewhat out of left field. The application itself was brought by a relatively unknown NGO, and it's perhaps not the case people were watching closely of all of those in the pipeline challenging either the lockdown in its entirety or certain aspects of it, like the continued ban on the sale of cigarettes. The High Court yesterday held that the government behaved well within the law by declaring a national state of disaster in March, but that the regulations pertaining to this lockdown are invalid because they infringe on people's rights in an excessive and irrational manner. Judge Davis said the government was obliged to see what was the smallest possible degree to which it could impact on people's rights while protecting the country from a massive health threat. He was very scathing in saying that the minister responsible for the regulations appears instead to have taken the opposite approach and decided that the end justified any means here. He gave her 2 weeks to redraft the regulations. Now, interestingly, this deadline coincides with the expiry of the legal lifespan of the state of disaster. It's fully expected that the government will extend that, but it's unclear at the moment how it will respond to the court ruling itself, whether it will go to the Constitutional Court to challenge it. So for now, it's very much to be continued, with South Africans watching very closely because the ruling coincides very much with public sentiment. If, like the court, South Africans initially felt that the government had every right to act quickly and firmly when confronted with the coronavirus crisis, there's been mounting resentment in recent weeks about how these regulations infringe on their lives.
MZ Ferreira there for us. Now, the coronavirus pandemic is the third major health emergency of its kind that South Africa's had to deal with over the last 100 years. There was the flu pandemic of the early 20th century and the AIDS epidemic that began in the 90s. The lessons learned informed the country's swift moves to tackle COVID-19. Take a look.
Khayelitsha is the largest township in Cape Town. Today, it's a hotspot of the coronavirus. A few years ago, there were many HIV cases here. Interestingly, many of the health workers who struggled against HIV in Khayelitsha are now back for the fight against COVID-19. To raise awareness about HIV, nurses went door to door, and they are doing the same today with the coronavirus.
With the HIV, there was a lot of stigma with HIV, the way you could get the transmission because it's through having sex, with a person that is HIV positive. And then the people in the township were thinking that, firstly, they started by thinking it's a gay disease and it's a white man disease.
The NGO Doctors Without Borders is opening a field hospital in the township. Staff that were here 20 years ago fighting HIV say the situation is very different now.
The attitude in that time regarding HIV were completely different. They were different because people didn't know about the disease. Strange disease, it was not documented like COVID has been nowadays. Everybody, with the media, everybody is aware of what it is.
This doctor added that the government this time round is taking strong action against COVID-19. In stark contrast to former President Thabo Mbeki, who at the beginning of this century did not believe that medical drugs should be used to fight HIV. Against the accepted scientific wisdom, Mbeki said AIDS was brought about by poverty, not by a virus. Researchers at Harvard University estimated his policies led to 300,000 avoidable deaths in South Africa.
Lesotho's former First Lady's back in jail on murder charges. The Court of Appeal revoked bail for Maisaya Tabane last Friday, and she was taken back into custody on Wednesday. She was charged in February, accused of arranging the assassination in 2017 of Lipolelo Tabane, the estranged wife of Maisaya's husband, Thomas Tabane. He resigned as president this month, but has denied involvement in the killing. Activists are calling for the government to clarify the circumstances surrounding the death of a Cameroonian journalist known as Samuel Wazizi. He was arrested a year ago for allegedly supporting Anglophone separatists. Rights campaigners say that he was tortured before he died in military hospital this week. Officials are reportedly refusing to release his body. In Burundi, officially, only one death from COVID-19 has been logged, and the government so far downplayed the risks of the illness. Nevertheless, some bloggers are still doing what they can to raise awareness about how communities can minimise exposure to coronavirus. Nicolas Chemin has more.
Officially, COVID-19 has only killed one person in Burundi, but some doctors say the real number is much higher. A group of bloggers called Yaga has decided that whatever the real figure is, they need to raise awareness about the virus. They've been posting many videos on social media.
D'autres pays comme l'Inde ont recensé l'un des plus gros confinements de l'histoire de l'humanité.
Comme Yaga est composé de gens qui sont issus de différents milieux, on a aussi des médecins qui participent et qui nous aident à trouver du contenu et des explications par rapport à nos followers qui posent aussi des questions qui nous sont envoyées et qui sont répondues par les blogueurs qui sont spécialisés dans le domaine sanitaire.
Some of the videos are in Kirundi, the national language. Others were made specifically for those who cannot read.
On a fait des vidéos de différents types, des sketchs, des vidéos explicatives, des vidéos de motion design. Tout ça dans le but de sensibiliser la population, de pouvoir fournir des informations fiables à la population burundaise.
President Pierre Nkurunziza recently declared that God had purified the air in Burundi, and that was why the death toll was so low. Yet last week, his wife was evacuated to a Nairobi hospital because of COVID-19, according to some Burundian officials. One of the president's advisors denied this and told Kenyan media that it was only for a medical checkup.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.